Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants event. My name is Joe Borowski, and I'll be your host for today. Always great to fire up one of these events, see all the faces of the students who are joining us live via the Zoom call, see all the groups who are starting to tune in live via YouTube. It's great to be able to continue the learning in these challenging times. Usually we'll be broadcasting live to classrooms across North America, but it's a lot of fun to be able to do these events and broadcast live into the homes of students and parents and educators across North America. It's been a busy day on Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants. We have had 6 events, live events today, bouncing all across North America, live at the zoo, hanging out with authors, meeting different scientists, and we've got one more really awesome event to wrap today up. Today, in partnership with Reach the World, an amazing organization out of the United States who pairs students with university students and scientists who are working around the world for really exciting events. We love doing these events with Reach the World. We are going to be joined today by Erikson, and Corey is going to share a little bit about his life growing up in Alaska and about the exciting work he does as a science liaison. So he works as a liaison between scientists and First Nations communities in the Arctic. He represents hundreds of Arctic researchers to thousands of Arctic residents and vice versa, representing the residents to the researchers. So, you know, these are important times right now. We hear about global warming, we see the changes in our weather. So we really do need to come together, Arctic residents, Arctic researchers. You know, it's a joint fight. So there's common threats, common challenges. So we do need to come together. So Corey, it's so awesome to have you joining us live from Alaska today. We've got a great group of classrooms on YouTube, a great group of classrooms in the call with us, and we're looking forward to learning about your job.
Awesome. Hi guys. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here to talk to you guys. Maybe I'll go ahead and start screen sharing, Joe. Is that okay?
Yeah, sounds good, Corey.
Okay. I'm going to open up my PowerPoint here and then go ahead and start. So my name is Kaare Erikson. Oops, what am I? It's supposed to say, who am I? So my first name, you might see that my first name is spelled kind of funny. So Kaare, but that equals Corey. And the spelling got a little bit confused when my family moved from Norway to the US almost 100 years ago. And then they moved up to Alaska afterwards. So my dad is Norwegian and my mom is Inupiat Eskimo. So you guys might, over in Canada, I know you guys call the First Nations, but over in Alaska, we call it Alaska Native. So it's the same thing, but it's basically the indigenous people who have been living on the land in the Arctic for a very, very long time. And my Inupiat name is Utqiagvik. Utqiagvik means after my grandpa's friend who passed away when I was born. So, and this picture on the left was actually last week when I was out riding and we were ice fishing and we were hunting way up north in the Arctic, and I'll talk a little bit about that later. So where am I from? So this map here is a little bit confusing. So before I jump into this map, I might exit out of this and go back to the Google Earth here. So I imagine that you guys are probably from, you might recognize some of these areas where you guys are from. Are you guys mostly from Canada, Eastern Canada, or Eastern US? Oh, cool. Yeah, I see a lot of nods heading. So from here, if you were to travel to Alaska, you have to come way over here. And I'm sure a lot of you guys know where we are, but way up north. We're a really, really big state. We're one state in the United States, but we do have a lot of ties to the Canadians up north, especially the people in Nunavut. We have a lot of relatives over there, the Inuit people. If you ever heard of Inuit people, that's the same, just about the same as the Inupiat people. So over in the northern Alaska up here is what we call the Inupiat homelands. I grew up way out in the rural Alaska. So Alaska looks like there's no villages or no people right now because it doesn't show them. But when you start to zoom in, there are actually hundreds and hundreds of villages scattered across all of the Arctic. The more you zoom in, you'll see more and more of them. And let me move this so I can get a little bit more control here. So I didn't actually grow up way up north where I work now, but I grew up to the south in some other, or to the west in some other villages. So the place that I work is currently at the very, 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 very far north right here. You see where my mouse is right here? At this point right here. This is called Barrow. It used to be called Barrow, but we recently changed the name to Utqiagvik. And there's about 5,000 people who live in Utqiagvik here. And this is the biggest village in all of the region. All these other villages have about 800 people. However, I grew up further on the west coast. See all these villages in between. I grew up right here in Untitled. I spent 6 years in St. Michael's. And I also grew up out here in Savunga. And we moved around because my dad was a teacher. We got to go around and teach in different schools. And my mom, like I said, she's a First Nations Inuit, Inupiat is what we call it here. And she actually grew up in Barrow. And that's how I actually got my ties to Barrow. I have a lot of relatives there. Right now, however, I'm down here in a population center in Anchorage because of, as you know, the COVID-19 has us stuck in certain places, and I'm not allowed to go up to Barrow for another 2 weeks. So now I'll zoom back out. So now that you have an idea of where Alaska is, you can kind of see the shape of Alaska here, if you don't know where it is. So I will go back to the presentation here. So now that you see the same shape of Alaska, you kind of see it here. This is obviously not as good of a map, but you can see that the stars on the map, like showing where I grew up. So on the west coast over here, it's kind of over here in the west coast, but it's also right on the borderland. You see there's a line right there. So everybody north is part of Inupiat. And like I said, that's the same group as the Inuit. Everybody south is Yupik. So that village that I grew up in was right on the borderland, and it was also close to the interior Indians. So these guys are the Dene people. So we're very, very close, and that village that I live in is mixed up between Inupiat, Yupik, Dene, and also a lot of non-native people living there too. So it's a very, very multicultural place. Oops. And you can see the pictures on the side. This is me on the left right here with my mom with the cool sunglasses. I grew up commercial fishing, me and my brother. My dad was a Norwegian fisherman and a school teacher. The picture here below is my mother, my Akka. Akka means grandma, and my 2 daughters when they were younger, Kaya and Tiny. Kaya, she's 12 now, and Tiny is 10 now. And I wish they were here for you guys to meet them. But we do a lot of fishing. This right here, this picture on the bottom left is actually a picture of us using rakes. All these are fish eggs that stick to they're kelp that stick to the rocks. So we pick up the eggs off the rocks and we eat them. We have crab pots right here, similar to maybe you guys might go lobstering. Any of you guys go out for lobster or eat lobster before? So that's very similar to this, what we do here with the crab pots. Oops, I lost my mouse. And then here's a picture of my family up in the right. So why is Utqiagvik, or why is Barrow so important? And remember I showed you it's way, way, way up on the northernmost point in all of the United States. It's even further north than lots of Canada, but Canada also has places that are further north than us. If you were to go out into the ocean here, like where my mouse is, and then turn around and look down at the land so that you're actually looking south, this is how it would look if you're hovering up in an airplane, or if you're on a nice cool drone or a hot air balloon or something, and you're looking at Barrow. So this right here where I'm circling is where Barrow or Utqiagvik is. It's the same thing, Barrow, Utqiagvik, we call it both. So the reason why this place is so valuable to the native people, to the First Nations, is because, can you see this dark water here? The dark water is open water, and the white, guess what the white is? You guys could probably guess. It's sea ice. So the dark water opens up here, and the whales and the seals and everything, they flow through here. And this is a really good place for native people to hunt whales and seals and fish. And basically you're going to get all the food you need throughout the year. So this has been a very, very popular place for people to live. And you can see one of our hunters up here in the top right. Very, very popular place for thousands of years. For example, if you look at this picture that has a number 1 right here, this shows the coastline right here. So if you were to drive along the beach, you guys probably, when you go along your beaches, you'll see cliffs and you'll see that kind of stuff where you're from. However, here we don't have cliffs. We have, it's kind of just piles of mud. And have any of you guys ever heard of permafrost or melting permafrost? So that's how our land is. A lot of our land is melting permafrost. And what the first picture shows is that this is a bluff, but if you look really closely right here, there's actually wood sticking out and wood planks and wood lumber. This was a series of old houses from about 2,000 years ago. And then the picture on the number 2 is one storm came in, and this is how much climate change is really affecting us, because the land is melting and then there's no sea ice to block the waves. So the waves can come in and just wash the land out. The picture on the right is from one storm. It undercut the whole house and it made everything fall off. So we had to go out and we had to, you could see some of our archaeologists, because we found human remains in this land as well. So we have a lot of our ancestors that are in these houses. So that's why we really need to take care of it. The picture on the very far right is actually a toy boat that one of the artifacts that we found. So we found all kinds of cool artifacts, toy boats, toy bow and arrows, real bow and arrows, real harpoons. And then if you look at this big long picture underneath here, that's actually a camp that we set up, and we brought up 30 archaeologists to go through all of these houses. And it took us 3 years to go through this, but we did that as a native group, because this was our ancestors' houses. So people have been here for a very, very long time, for thousands and thousands of years. And the oldest artifacts that we found in this site were over 4,000 years old. So people have been whaling up here for thousands and thousands of years. Scientists have also been using Barrow for a very long time. So ever since about 150 years ago, over maybe 170 years ago, they started coming up and using Barrow to study the ice, to study the Arctic environment, and to kind of explore and try to find new ways to boat around the top of Alaska. So you might be wondering now, what do I do and what does we do at UIC Science? Joe mentioned that I'm a liaison. What is a liaison? A liaison is someone who works with both the scientists and the locals up here in the Arctic to make sure that everything goes good. So to back up a little bit, our group is called UIC Science, and the scientists, they like to come up to the Arctic and study whatever they're studying. So one scientist might be studying polar bears. One other scientist might be studying ice. Another scientist might be studying the melting ground. Another scientist might be studying the air that's up in the cold air. All of these people are really, really smart at what they do. However, they don't really know how to live in the Arctic. They don't know how to look for the dangers, and they don't know how to be really safe in the Arctic. So the reason why, so who do you think would know how to survive in the Arctic? Any of you guys? Who do you think?
All right, let's put someone on the spot here. Let's go to Alex Y. Who do you think would know how to survive? No, no. Let's try somebody else. How about Nate? What do you think, Nate?
I think it would be like you have to be really careful and be on the lookout for polar bears, and you're gonna have to stay warm.
Yeah, so Nate, who do you think would be a good guide to help you survive in the Arctic?
The Native Americans or the Eskimos.
Perfect. You're exactly right. No, you guys are very. I'm impressed how quick you guys answered that. That's awesome. So like I said, the scientists, they really, really know how to do things. However, they always have their heads down and they're playing with their science equipment, and they're really, really busy people. They don't have time to stand up and kind of look around and make sure the polar bears don't sneak up, because the polar bears could sneak up and it could get really dangerous. Or the weather might change. And if the weather and the wind starts to blow a different direction, it might blow the ice away from the shore. So it could get really, really dangerous. So the scientists, they hire us. They hire our guys. We have about 12 guys. They're all Inupiaq native guys. A lot of them are my cousins. Like I said, my mom's from Barrow, so I'm part of that Inupiaq group that serves as scientists, and we basically work back and forth. We're learning from the scientists, but also the scientists ask us questions and ask us about the environment, so that we share a lot of knowledge. And it's a really, really fun job. And I'll back up to this slide. I kind of had it out of sequence, but other things other than just hiring us for our knowledge, we also provide all types of other things. We have a research campus outside of Barrow. And if you were going to hover above Barrow with a drone, here's the village right here that you can kind of see here. But then if you were to look out towards the point, you see where it says Gnarl. So Gnarl is the research campus that we own and operate. It's called the Naval Arctic Research Laboratories. The Navy left in 1981, and then we took over the campus. What does a campus normally have? If you think of even of a college campus, what would a campus provide people?
All right, let's see who could try that one. Sophia, what do you think? What could a campus provide?
Maybe like a campus that has flat ground for them to easily live on.
Yep, definitely. Yep, and that's the key right there, is that to live on. So if you have a college campus to live on, they probably need housing, right? So the campus is going to provide houses. They probably need somewhere to work. So the campus is going to have labs, almost like a college campus. And they need something to eat. So there's a place to eat on the campus. And if you look at the things that we provide on the campus, we provide vehicles, we provide equipment, we provide laboratories, housing, remote tents. So they want to go out on the ice and have a lab out on the ice. We'll go make a lab for them on the ice. You can see some of the labs here on the bottom right. Those orange tents are actually science labs that are out on the ice. And this big drill you see right here, if you ever did ice fishing, that's what that is. That's the auger. We actually have really, really big augers, much bigger than that, to make big holes. So I was really impressed that you guys provided really good answers really quick. So we have a very well-informed group of students. And here's a couple more pictures of kind of what I illustrated, what the scientists do in their work. You see how they have their heads down here. And then the guy standing right in the middle there, this is one of our guys, Michael Thomas. You see he has a gun. He's almost like a bodyguard. He guards the scientists and he takes care of them. So who do we work with? This is where it gets kind of interesting. We work with so many different people. We have approximately, I believe, 400 scientists visit our village every year. So that's a lot. So if you look here, oops. And this picture is just kind of a picture of all the different scientists that we work with. There's a whole ton of them. And just to give you a couple examples before we open it up to questions, I will show you. So NASA, what do you notice about this picture here and this picture here? What is on the ground here and what color is it? These two.
All right, let's pick someone. Let's let someone raise their hand if they want to answer that question. Oh, Andres, let me get your microphone turned on.
Is that like on the moon or something, maybe?
That's right. It is on a moon. It's on a moon called Europa. It's on Europa is one of Jupiter's moons. They have a lot of moons in Jupiter. And what do you see here, Andreas, on the surface of this moon?
I see a bunch of like different colored rocks.
Yep, definitely. And it looks like rocks, but it's actually
oh yeah, it's a bunch of, dang it.
You can see it on this one better, the bottom one. What color is that?
It's like asteroids.
So I'm sure it does. I can almost assure you it does have asteroid material. This is actually frozen ice. So that's what's unique about Europa moon, is that it has ice and it has oceans underneath it. So it's a big moon with oceans and ice. And the scientists, they really, really want to go there because they think little animals and little living creatures live under the ice. So where do you think they would find a place to test that's similar to Europa?
All right. What do you think, Catherine? Where's a place they could go that would be similar to Europa?
Antarctica?
Yes, that actually is a really good answer. Oops, I'm sorry, I'm trying to move this here.
Let's grab Nate too. Nate wants to say something. Go ahead, Nate.
Maybe Mars, because Mars also has ice, which is frozen water, and it used to have an atmosphere.
Yes, that is total. That is an awesome answer. And so those are both really good answers. So the thing about both of those places is that it might be a little bit hard for them to go back and forth. So if you have a laboratory in, say, California, it might be hard for them to go back and forth to Mars or Antarctica. So the easiest place for them to go to is to fly up to us. And I'm going to show you a few seconds of this video. And this is the Jet Propulsion Laboratory. A little bit about one of the drones that they test right here in Barrow.
Analog for the exploration of Europa's ocean, which is trapped beneath a big ice shelf. It is the Arctic, and so our team developed this motorized route to study this. Here we're just taking expeditions.
Okay, so did you see the snow machines and the sleds and the people that are driving them and all the equipment they have? So all that stuff, they don't bring any of that stuff. We actually provide all of that stuff to them. So we work very, very closely with all these different scientists, and this is actually one example of it. And as you can see here, this is a science fair that was here in Barrow, and the NASA guys, every time they come up, they have a new model. And 6 years ago, when they first started coming, they started with a little teeny plastic model. And when they came up, we were kind of looking at it and we were like, I thought this was going to be NASA. I thought they're going to have really cool stuff, but it was like a tiny, cheap little model that they made on a 3D printer. And we were like, no, there's no way that they're taking that up into outer space. However, when they started coming back, it was getting more and more and more complicated. So the one you see on the right here is the newest model that they have. And I think this is prototype number 28. And what this does is, you can see on the end of this actually turns into a torpedo. All the ends of it kind of folds down and it turns into a point. And you're able to put that whole thing into a fishing hole. And it goes down under the ice and it becomes like a buoy and it pushes up against the bottom of the ice. It's floating on the bottom of the ice and it actually drives around on the bottom. That's why it's called Buoyant Rover Under Ice Experiment. And the last time they came, we put that device under one of our lakes and they drove it from California for a whole week. For 7 days, they drove it all the way from California. That's how far the remote control could work. So they're getting really, really close and really good at this. Here's a couple other pictures. These guys are pretty famous for their work. Kevin Hand is very well known. There's a National Geographic article about him. And these are all taking place right in our backyard, right here in Barrow, in Utqiagvik. They're also developing ice harpoons for asteroids. This is one of their prototypes, and this is a different group. This is from University of Washington through NASA. And I'll back up a little bit, and you're probably wondering about these hypervelocity rockets. They're actually up here testing hypervelocity rockets as well to penetrate the ice. And then the second example I'll give, and the last example, is the US Navy. They also have a lot of work up here. So the Navy it's the military guys, and they come up and we host a camp. You see where Barrow is? Way, way, way offshore out there. We host an ice camp. So we set up a camp for them every 2 years. And we have about 10 guys that work on this project every 2 years. And they go out there and we set up the camp for a whole month. And then they will bring their submarines up here. And it's a whole bunch of different countries. So we have Canada, we have US, Great Britain, Norway. They all take part in this. And we're the ones that get to host them because they know that we, as Inupiaq, as Native people, we know the most about the ice conditions. So we keep all these guys safe. Even when they're going under the ice, you see this picture down in the bottom right? This is a diver, and this is probably about 30 below degrees outside. Behind them, you have the big missile. It's a torpedo they're testing. And then right here is the diver, and they're trying to test how they could shoot the missiles under ice. Hopefully we'll never have to go to war and do that, but they want to be ready. And here's another couple other pictures. We just got back from the ice, and you know, this year we had to cut it short for our Ice X exercise. We had to cut it short, but here's kind of a picture of what our guys get to deal with. And this is actually the submarine coming through the ice here. And our guys who were out there said it was a very, very scary experience because although you can't notice it, the submarine's making the ice go up and down right in their camp. And it's a huge, huge submarine. This thing is, you would look very tiny if you were standing on this thing right here. So we've worked with the Navy ever since 1941. We've had contracts with the Navy. So it's a very, very, very long relationship that we had with these guys. And I am almost to the question page. I gave you 2 examples of who we work with, the NASA and the Navy guys, but they're very unique examples. Most of the people that we work with, they're dealing with climate change and they're looking at climate change. I know that you guys have heard of that and we all have heard of that. So I won't go into all the different examples, but we do have a lot of cool projects, probably up to 200 to 300 scientists each year come out and they utilize our research campus and they utilize our observatory. We have a very big observatory, 7,500 acre observatory that we put aside just for science experiments. And that's right on our native land. And it has towers and all kinds of stuff out there. And now that because of the COVID-19 and the coronavirus, scientists can't come do their research this summer. So they want us to do their research for them. So we've been really, really busy. And it's really opening up new doors and new opportunities for the Native Americans and the scientists to work more closely together. Loss of sea ice is a huge one too. A lot of people study the loss of sea ice. Melting ground. Here's another picture of kind of how our coasts are melting. We live on frozen ground. And a lot of it is ice. So it could get very dangerous when it's melting. There could be big holes in the ground or the coast could just fall right off under your feet. And I wouldn't stand out there if I were you guys like that guy. So I've gone through the things and now I guess we're ready for some questions if you do have them.
All right, Corey, thank you so much. Let's get you to come back to us if you stop. There we go. We got you. That was awesome, Corey. Just incredible science going on in a part of the world that's so removed from many of our lives so far north. But such important research, especially around the climate change and, future exploration of our solar system and beyond. It's pretty darn cool. All right, so we've got a great group on YouTube. So if there's any questions on YouTube, use the chat sidebar on the right. Let us know where you're watching from and send us in a few questions. I can see some students in the call have already raised their hands. Let's introduce a couple of the groups who are joining us today. So we've got Ms. Kenny's group is joining us from Guelph, Ontario. It's grade 5s. Some of them are in the call with us today. Then we also have Mrs. Smeagol, who is joining us from Toronto, Ontario. Her grade 4-5, some of them are tuning in live via YouTube today. So that's awesome. Let's start grabbing some of those. Oh, lots of hands are coming up, Corey. We're gonna be busy for a few minutes. Catherine, let's get your microphone first.
If there's been ice that's been there for thousands of years, there must be really old bacteria in the ice. And now that the ice is melting due to global warming, has there been any interesting bacterial finds?
Yeah, that's a really good question. That we as the scientists are they've been looking at that a little bit, but honestly, the more I hear that, more I see that in the headlines in the newspapers, probably the same place where you guys are seeing it. So there is old bacteria coming out of the land, but I haven't, as people who live in the Arctic, we haven't heard of any dangers directly to us from those bacteria. I'll give you one cool example, is that, remember the big archaeology site that I showed you guys that slumped off? So when we were digging that, we actually found a very old mummified seal. And you know, right now, a lot of the seals in global warming, they're getting sick. Have you guys ever heard of algae blooms? So as the water's getting warmer and warmer, there's more of these little bugs that could live in the water that might make our animals sick. So right now, everyone's thinking that global warming is causing these big algae blooms that are killing a lot of our seals. What we did is we found a mummified seal, which was from about the year 1900. It was actually on top of the houses that we dug out. So about 120-year-old seal. We got that tested, and it actually showed that the nanotoxins, or the dangerous algae blooms, actually used to exist back then too. So that showed that there were dangers back then too. But I think we're going to find out more and more about the dangerous bacteria that's melting in the permafrost, because the science that's happening right now, they're actually just learning about it, and we'll find out once they publish their results. So I'm sure in the next year or two, you're gonna hear more about that, and you'll learn about it the same time we probably learn about it. So that's a really good question.
All right, good question to start us off. Alicia, let me turn your microphone on.
My question is, are there a lot of polar bear attacks?
So not necessarily, but they also know that the people are, because all the villages are always ready, and we have probably 10 people that their job in Barrow is to make sure that the polar bears don't attack people. So what they do is, instead of going out and shooting and killing every polar bear, what we do is we have different ways to scare them. So like our polar bears, you guys saw that we had the guns. We don't actually have real bullets in those guns because we don't want to kill the polar bears. We just want to just scare them off and let them know that we don't want them to mess with us. So we have what are called firecracker rounds. They look like shotgun bullets, but when you shoot the gun, it actually shoots out almost like a little firework, shoots out towards the bear, and it goes on the ground, and it goes boom, and it'll scare the bear away. And that's one thing. If the bear starts to charge us, we still don't want to kill it. So we actually have beanbag rounds. We'll get the gun with the beanbags, and we'll shoot the gun with the beanbags, and it'll just hit the bear, kind of like give him a tap, and it'll stop the bear, and the bear will run away. So we have ways to scare bears away, and we call them bear deterrents. However, once in a while, the bears do get a little bit too aggressive, and sometimes they do have to be put down. But that's a really good question. And the whole reason why we're so safe with so many people is to try to prevent the bear attacks. And it's been a long, long time since we have anybody die from a polar bear. And it's been probably 30, 40 years since someone died on the North Slope of Alaska from a polar bear. Brown bears are way more aggressive. Brown bears are a lot more scarier. Polar bears, they don't want to fight unless they're really, really hungry. They don't attack like brown bears do. Brown bears are a lot more dangerous on land.
All right, Mary, let me turn your microphone on. Oops, I think you might have to do it for me, Mary.
Can you hear me?
We gotcha.
My question is that has the global warming been giving you an advantage or disadvantage of what you're trying to do?
That's an awesome question. I'm so glad you asked, because a lot of people will think that global warming is really, really, really bad for everybody because of what we read in the newspapers. But it actually there are a lot of bad things, but there are some benefits as well. So one benefit that we do have right now is that our villages, they rely on the big whales. We eat the whale blubber, and it really makes people healthy. The thing about is that with more and more open water, that's allowing for more zooplankton and more little teeny krill to live in the water, and that's allowing for our whales to eat more. So our whales population is actually getting bigger and stronger, but since there's less ice, it's harder for us to catch the whales. So it's kind of good and bad. There are good things and bad things. Another example is that the moose populations further south, there's more trees growing up, and they're bigger trees with the warmer summers, so that the moose are actually, there's more and bigger moose that are populating, but then there are some animals that are kind of starting to go extinct, that are starting to go away because of the moose populations, like caribou, for instance. They're not going further south anymore. So people are having to start hunting different things and living off of different things. So it's some good things and some bad things. Really, really good question.
All right. I thought I'd check in with Miss Smeagol and see if she has any questions for us from her Toronto group.
Yes, I have one question from one of our students, Sarah, who was asking about the torpedoes that they're using. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Yes, so the Navy, they have a really, really good system of shooting torpedoes underwater all around the world, and they could operate those torpedoes from the satellites. So but the problem is that when you go to the north, why do you think the satellites don't work when they shoot the torpedoes? Anybody? Sarah?
All right. Anybody have an idea? We can have a hand raised if someone thinks why. Oh, Catherine thinks maybe. Let me see. Catherine, what do you think?
Kaya. Sorry, that's my mom's name. And maybe the satellites wouldn't work because the temperatures are so cold that like the air can't pass through or something. I don't know, but like maybe like however the satellites work, like the thing that makes it like a connection, maybe because the air is so cold it almost like freezes. I don't know. I know that sounds silly.
No, you're right. You're right. And the thing is that it's the ice actually. So it gets so cold that the ice is the barrier that stops it from communicating with the satellites. So the satellites can't communicate with the torpedoes underneath the ice because of the ice is in the way. So what those guys are doing is they're learning how to put devices on the ice that could communicate with the torpedo underneath and the satellite. So it needs a kind of a middleman. So what they'll do is they'll drop off kind of this almost like a Wi-Fi thing, you know, like where they'll drop that off on the ice that will communicate with the torpedo, and that it'll also communicate with the satellites. So yep, the ice and the freeze is the cold. It's the cold that is actually stopping it from communicating. You're right. And I see Andreas has a hand up as well.
All right, let me get Andres' microphone turned on.
How many people, like while they're trying to fish, have fallen into the water?
Great question. And like kind of tying it back to the question earlier about polar bear attacks. So we haven't had too many polar bear attacks, but global warming is having a very, very, very big impact on our people. And that's because of the thinning ice. And we do a lot of travel across the land, and it's getting very, very dangerous. And lots of people have fallen in through the water, and that's usually while they're traveling. Sometimes when they're fishing, but I personally, I've lost a lot of friends my own age, even younger than me, older than me, relatives, due to snow machines driving, and then they fall through the ice, they get wet, and there's nothing you could do once you get wet unless you have a cabin or a shelter nearby. It gets really, really dangerous. So we've all lost a lot of people due to these thinning ice and these really, really warm winters that we've been having. So it's pretty sad, but it's something that we have to adapt to if we need to stay safe.
Yeah. Okay, I can see in the chat there's a question from Nate. I'm going to turn Nate's mic on. Nate, do you want to ask that question directly to Corey, or do you want me to ask it from the chat?
You can ask that.
Yeah? Okay. So Nate is wondering how long you've been working at UIC.
Cool. So I've been working at UIC for 5 years now. However, I worked for 10 years before that. So about 15 years, I worked for a similar organization. And I see another good question right after that. It says, who made UIC?
Uh-huh.
So that's a really, really good question. And so it gets kind of complicated, but it was made back in 1971 is when UIC was made. The natives in Alaska, they got in a kind of a big fight with the US federal government because the federal government was taking all the land. So the natives kind of had a big fight, and we ended up making a deal. The deal was that each village could create their own business. And so there was 220 businesses created in 1971 through the Alaska Native Claims Settlement Act. That was a deal that the US federal government made with people in Alaska. And we got $1 billion to split up amongst 220 organizations. UIC is the company that was started in Barrow. So that's the kind of that village's owned business. It's called the Ukpeaġvik Inupiat Corporation, UIC. And since my mom was alive and living in Barrow at that time, she became a shareholder. She became a part owner of that company. And then any of the shareholders' kids, those are the ones that get to work for the company and kind of run the company. So me and my cousins and a lot of my friends, we run UIC Science. UIC has become very, very big. We have 52 businesses and over 2,000 employees, with about 800 employees on the East Coast. So you guys might know some people that work for us. We have lots and lots and lots of employees across the US, and we have a lot of businesses, and UIC Science is one. Out of all the businesses we own, only 5 of them, of the 52 businesses, only 5 of them are in Utqiagvik or in Barrow on our own land. All the other 47 businesses are scattered across the US. So we own a lot of businesses, and you guys might even know of some of them as well. I don't have that list though.
Okay, very cool. So if there are any more questions, feel free to raise your hand or put in the chat. But I did want to ask, oh, actually, let's get Nebi first. Let me unmute that microphone. All right. Nebi, are you there?
Can you hear me?
We gotcha.
How many people have like gotten hurt by the bears or like scratched?
It's a good question. So with scientists, we haven't had any that I am aware of. The federal government, the US government, and the other governments that pay for the research, they do pay a lot to make sure that their scientists are really safe. So we haven't had any of that happen. The thing about polar bears is they really try to avoid any type of conflict because they have to be very careful not to burn energy, because they have to be very, very careful. And if they fight, that means they're going to burn a lot of energy. That means they got to eat more. So they don't tend to fight off the bat unless they're starving. And the thing about polar bears, when they're near our villages, they're actually usually really full, and they could barely walk because they're so full. Because what we do is when we catch our whales, we instead of what we used to do is pull the bones out and let them go through the ice. But now what we do is we pull them out to the point, and we let the whales finish off the bones. So the whales get to eat a part of the bears get to eat a little bit of the whale, so that anytime the bears are around our villages, they're actually usually pretty full, and they're just walking really slowly, and they want to lay down and rest. And if they get too close to one of us, we'll shoot the little firecracker, the little popper rounds right by it, and it'll stand up and look at us, and it'll walk away kind of slowly. Sometimes they'll run away, but a lot of times they're really, really full, and they're not really looking for a fight. So that's a good thing. But like I said, the brown bears on the interior, like that live on the land and further inland, those guys are almost like a bully who just you don't want to mess with, because they don't care about things. They just react and they just attack right away. And you got to be real careful with brown bears. You could never really know. Whereas with polar bears, when they come around, we just at our whaling camps, they just walk by, and we have the gun ready, but they just kind of walk by and they look at us, and we look at them, and they don't really attack us at all. So that's one good thing about the difference between polar bears and brown bears, even though they could be very scary.
All right. Well, I want to start off with a huge thank you to the groups who tuned in via YouTube. Thanks for joining us for some learning today. A huge thank you to our groups who joined us on camera today. Thanks for your awesome questions. And Corey, that was great. Thank you for taking us a little bit into your life and the work that you get to do up in the north. It's pretty exciting. And we'll definitely have to tap you on the shoulder and host you again. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, definitely. I'd love to. And if you guys ever have any questions, Joe knows how to get a hold of me. Shoot me an email. That's my job. My job is to help with people on the outside. As a liaison, I help everybody on the outside work with our people. And I just very quickly, I'll answer Arian's question. What are the other business names? If you go online and you look up UIC Alaska, you can go to our website and you can see all types of businesses that we have. We have barges, we have construction businesses, we have government services, we have all kinds of stuff. So if you're interested, you could look on our website.
All right, very cool. Well, again, Corey, thank you so much. That was a great event today. I'm going to turn the microphones on. We'll let the students get a little bit loud wherever you are, nice and loud. A big goodbye and thank you. Here come the microphones.
Thank you.
All right.
Awesome, guys. It was my pleasure.
Bye.
My pleasure. I enjoyed it.
Bye.
All right. Awesome. Great job, everybody. They love that part where they get to be a little bit loud. Again, Corey, awesome. Look forward to a future connection. And yeah, you enjoy the rest of your week.
Thank you, Joe. And if the kids want connections like to the NASA guys or the Navy guys or any of our scientists, I got direct connections to all those guys, and they're actually looking to do stuff right now too. So,
all right, sounds good. All right,
perfect.
Thanks again, everyone, and we are going to sign off for today.